Sit! Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Rich Dotson. He's Matt O'Hara.
Hey.
He's Garrett Price.
How's it going?
It's going good, and that's the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. I have got to go. My wife just texted me. She's bringing home a gyro for me from a fair, and I love it so much. So we're gonna do the fastest show ever. No, it's gonna be the regular show. I can eat a tepid gyro. It's okay. I could get
it's just not gonna be as good, man. It's fine.
You're right. It won't be as good, but even lukewarm gyro is still a good gyro. Dude, street gyros, man, it's up there for me in love. Like when it comes to food,
what is it about food coming out of a truck that automatically makes it taste better?
Well, first of all, fresh food's big, right? So like getting it instantly and putting it in your mouth is like, yeah, it's good stuff right there immediately.
I think most of the time it's unexpected too, right? Like you're just walking down the street, boom, hey, damn, there's food right there. I'm hungry. All of a sudden, yes, I do want that. Let's do it.
You're right. I didn't plan on this encounter. Here we go. Yeah. I mean,
but honestly,
fresh is great.
Like almost anything. Like if you would say, hey, here's this building that serves gyros, and then here's this truck that does. Which one do you want? I'm choosing the truck. Like here's this truck that serves tacos. Here's this building that does. I'm choosing the truck. Like, I don't know what happens in the trucks. I don't know what the magic is, but I like it better every time.
No, we've all been brainwashed. The ice cream truck.
Maybe.
It's true. And Garrett, it's so funny that you say that because I could literally, so I've lived in my current house here for about 9 years. Probably 4 minutes away was a place called Nick's Gyros. All right.
Best gyros in town. Best gyros in town.
Yeah. Probably best gyros in town. I went there one time in 8 years. One time. If I walk by a gyro truck at a fair, like I'm getting a gyro 100%. I don't care if I just left Thanksgiving dinner. Like I'm putting it in my pocket, and we're going to say that tzatziki sauce pocket for later. So yeah, you're right. Like I don't
know what it is.
5 minutes at the most. Now they just closed. Now it's a coffee place. So I missed my opportunity, but that's fair because I wasn't going there anyways. It's got to come out of a truck.
It's got to come out of a truck.
So we're back with the NFC West. I'm sitting here salivating. So if I have a lisp more than normal, or if I sound lispy or overly talkative, yeah, it's because my saliva's at an all-time high because I'm thinking of tzatziki sauce, onions, and lamb meat on a pita. So let's get into this. Let's start off with the Arizona Cardinals at QB, Kyler Murray, Desmond Ridder, Clayton Tune. At running back, James Conner, Trey Benson, Amari DiMarcado, DJ Dallas. At wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Chris Moore, Zay Jones, Zach Pascal, tight end Trey McBride, Elijah Higgins, Tip Raymond. I love seeing Greg George, friend of the company. Jeff Bell from Football Guys, like I saw he posted his expo highlights, and it was a picture of a pool, the stadium, and then Greg Dortch highlight. So I think of Greg Dortch. I'm now forever going to think of Jeff Bell from Fantasy Football Guys. Good guy over there, great writer. So let's dive into the Arizona Cardinals, which is for the last couple of years historically been a really good run game. It's been really beneficial for our guy James Conner here. Been put up some pretty good numbers over these last couple of years. Flirting with, he wants to kind of break into that running back one mold. Kind of can be viewed as a running back too. But James is a little bit older now. On the backside of the good running back age, and they spent a third-round pick on Garrett and I's arguably favorite running back in this class in Trey Benson.
Yeah, they did. And, as far as James Conner goes, he really has been one of the more underrated fantasy football backs over the past few seasons, constantly putting up the yards, even being involved to some extent in the passing game. And that's what the Cardinals have shown. Like, when they have a guy that they trust in the backfield, they're willing to give him the bulk of the work. Now, it was really interesting. We saw 6 or 7 carries from Trey Benson in the preseason game, and all I heard all over Twitter was how bad Trey Benson looks and how he's going to be a bust. And it made me chuckle. It made me chuckle a lot because, look, first of all, it's week 1 of the preseason. So that in and of itself is funny that we're already like, the guy's dead. But 2, backup offensive line, and you could tell like they were just getting beat. Like the offensive line was getting beat almost every play. But what it really reminded me of, and granted, they're not the same player. I'm not saying he's as good as this player necessarily. But it reminded me a lot of Jonathan Taylor, where you have this explosive athlete. And we saw from the combine, this guy is truly an explosive athlete. We saw it in his college tape. He's explosive. And when you looked at him in the game, we're talking about all these other guys. The Audric Estimes look more explosive than we thought, and all these other players. And then you watch him and you're like, oh man, is he actually like slow and plodding and blah, blah, blah? No, he's a fantastic athlete. What happens for some of these guys, especially if it's not excellent offensive line play, is they tend to overthink. They tend to not be processing quickly enough right away. And that's what we saw to Jonathan Taylor first half of his first season. And I remember a lot of people writing him off completely, and we're all in on what we saw of the first few games of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and how did the tables turned. So for me, this has opened up now potentially a small buying window on Trey Benson. I know one of our writers, Taylor Christensen, actually our editor, he just made a trade like today where he got Trey Benson for a 25 second and third, and he got Benson in a 5th. So like if this opens up any sort of buy window for Trey Benson, like I'm all in.
I think that's a great point. And Taylor, I think, is a good reference point. I know, like you mentioned, they're not the same player, but I think the explosion that both of them have, I think, is kind of a little bit similar there. So I think there can be parallels that are drawn there to some extent. So listen, this is going to be one of those things where James Conner starts a year, and he's going to be the guy. I think he is underrated, but he's going to be playing in his age 29 season. So this is obviously a team that's invested in Trey Benson to kind of be the heir apparent. And while he figures it out, while things slow down, they don't need to feed him a lot. They can feed James Conner. He's going to be a guy that can handle that load. He's the guy that averages over 5 yards a carry, or he did last season, and took 200 over 200 carries 208 carries. So he's a guy that can definitely do it. He can hold up. He can basically run the show. He's a 3-down type of guy. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He led the team last year in receptions, 27 for him, 24 for Michael Carter, who's still there and kind of just an annoying guy, a guy that might have value at some point if there's an injury or 3 ahead of him. But other than that, not much to talk about. And then Imari DeMarca, how the hell do you say that guy's name, had 21 catches as well. But it's James Conner, and then it's going to be Trey Benson, and Trey Benson just might need a little bit of time, and that's all it's going to take. Did I love what I saw? No, but I think what your explanation goes a long way in explaining kind of what didn't look great or why it didn't look great and what maybe was happening there. Now, listen, if he starts getting in with the first team offense and it's week 6, week 7 of the regular season, he still looks like that, those questions might start to become a little bit more validated, I think, at that point. But, for now, I'm not going to hit the panic button. And I think if you do get a chance to, get a bottom, a guy that was definitely going in the first round for a second round draft pick and some other, garbage late round throw-ins, I think that's great value. And there's going to be a point when James Conner is gone, either due to injury this year or just age next year, that you'll be able to recoup more than what you're giving up for him. So I think that does make a lot of sense to go out and trade for him, just from even if you don't love the guy, you'll be able to get more for him once he's the starter, kind of a long-term kind of hold and flip, so to speak.
Yeah, an overpaid A is an underpaid tomorrow. During the draft class, I gave a pick I think was believed to be 111 or 112. I felt pretty confident it'd be 111 or 112. For Trey Benson. I still to this day feel pretty good about it. Like I said, I'm not going to overly worry about one preseason game where maybe a running back's possibly overthinking there. When you go back to the quarterback position, Kyler Murray, who's been electric at the fantasy football position, is now a full year removed from that ACL tear. Already reports, like he came out and said, last year I felt really comfortable running in a straight line. This year I feel really comfortable, in my cuts, in my agility, which is where Kyler Murray is really going to eat. And then you bring him a true number one weapon. The last time where Kyler Murray was like a really dominant fantasy football quarterback, he had DeAndre Hopkins out there balling out. So I bring in a guy, Marvin Harrison Jr., who is really good after the catch, and that's something that the Cardinals were missing as well. They didn't have any receivers there that were actually good with the ball in their hands, right? Like they're all just very subpar receivers. So you take Marvin Harrison Jr., you put a big receiver on the outside, like Michael Wilson, and then you have Zay Jones there too, who, listen, Zay Jones is a very solid receiver as well. Yeah. This could be arguably, Kyler Murray's best receiving core that he's ever had in the NFL, because you put Trey McBride there at the same position, who's dominant. We saw him dominate last year. This is a really good offense that Arizona Cardinals have put together here. So, obviously Murray's biggest question will be like, how is he at the end of the season for you? Because that's been his biggest Achilles heel. Like with his demeanor and his stature, he's either been hurt or he's been kind of nicked up when you need him the most, and that's the fantasy football playoffs, and that's where you need him to step up. I know the offensive line should be better this year. They're moving Paris Johnson to the left tackle, and they signed Jonah Williams, formerly a good pick of the Cincinnati Bengals, to play right tackle, so that should help as well. Offense should be pretty excited. Historically, you guys mentioned a really good run team. You have James Conner solid, but you bring this explosive Trey Benson in with all these really good young players. I'm excited to see Michael Wilson take another step forward this year, paired with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. This could be an offense that we could see here in the NFC. Maybe take a step forward and kind of like start to inch their way to be a playoff team. Definitely the NFC being wide open.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I think all those guys make a lot of sense. The Kyler Murray thing about his knee, I think is good news from a fantasy perspective. It can also, for me, be in the back of my brain, it is slightly scary too, because maybe he wasn't running quite as much last year because he didn't feel as comfortable doing it. And does now he expose himself to some more hits because he's out there running around feeling normal again? And like you said, he's got small stature. He's a tiny guy. So that's the only thing that it both excites me and makes me a little bit nervous about Kyler Murray coming up this season.
Hey, Nerd Herd, this is Rich Dotson. I've got some exciting news for you. Underdog Fantasy is back with their annual Best Ball Mania tournament, and this year it's bigger than ever with a whopping $15 million prize pool. Best Ball Mania 5 is the ultimate fantasy football competition where you draft your team and then sit back and relax. No trades, no waivers, just your best lineup every week automatically set by Underdog. For just $25, you can enter for a shot at the grand prize of $1.5 million. Plus, there are tons of other prizes throughout the season, including $500,000 for the top regular season performer. And guess what? We've got a special offer just for our listeners. Use the promo code NERDS when you sign up, and Underdog will give you up to $250 in bonus cash with your first deposit. Don't miss out. Drafts are happening now. The entries close before the first game of the season. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app. Sign up with promo code NERDS and start your journey to fantasy football glory today. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concern with your play. Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. In Tennessee, call 1-800-889-9789. All right, my gyro is en route. Let's move on to the next team.
All right, the next team is the Los Angeles Rams, and a quarterback they have Matthew Stafford, Stetson Bennett, and some guy I've never heard of.
Did they sign Jimmy Garoppolo?
Dresser Win or something goofy? No, I don't think they have. Oh, yeah, they do have Jimmy Garoppolo. Why is he on this depth chart?
He was on the depth chart too, but I was doing my research. Like, it was weird. He was on our lads, and I was like, wait a minute, they signed Jimmy Garoppolo, and I had to double check that. I was like, yeah, they signed Jimmy Garoppolo.
He's definitely on that roster. So don't forget Dresser or whatever the heck that guy's weird name is. and put Jimmy Garoppolo in there as the number 2. And at running back, they have Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, Boston Scott, Ronnie Rivers, Zach Evans. At the wide receiver position, they have Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington. Those are the only guys really.
You can stop. You can just stop at Puka and Cooper Kupp. It's
yeah,
really
that's
that
it.
Short of a list.
Yeah, basically. At tight end, they have got Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, Hunter Long, a bunch of other guys you don't care about as well. So, obviously, like you said, the wide receivers, I think Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, these guys are the most valuable guys. And obviously the running back position went from one that felt really good last year to kind of who knows what we're going to get with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. So let's dig in a bit, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of oh man, if I'm being honest, I feel like there's a lot of sell here. A lot of sell. Matt Stafford had a amazing second half of the season, definitely when McVay kind of mixed up the offense there. Solid. But then when you look at Puka Nacua, he's skyrocketed up dynasty rankings. He's skyrocketed up my dynasty rankings. And I'm saying, honestly, guys, I'm thinking about moving him down just slightly. Coming off the most amazing rookie year ever, 105 catches, 1,486 yards and 6 touchdowns. But what makes me nervous is Cooper Kupp's a real solid receiver himself. And I know, listen, when they're on the field, they saw all the targets. They didn't even throw to anybody else. They saw 95% of the targets, 90%. But when Cooper Kupp came in there, his averages dropped down pretty significantly. When he was the guy, obviously being in Sean McVay's offense, he's out there averaging almost 110 yards a game and almost 9 catches. But when Kupp's in there, he's averaging about 5 catches for about 80 yards a game. So we're talking about, what are we talking here? About 5 points per game, a PP game, 5 points per game differential for Puka Nacua with Cooper Kupp out there. Now, listen, even those numbers are still very good numbers. So that's why it's not I'm going to say he's just done here. But if you're thinking Puka Nacua is going to have a top 4, top 5 finish again in 2024, if Cooper Kupp stays healthy, I don't see that happening. I see maybe one of those guys sneaking in as a back end wide receiver 1, anywhere from say 8 to 12. Another one being a high end wide receiver 2. So both championship caliber players. But when you have a guy like Puka coming in as a top 5 rookie season, I would kind of want to take the reins back on that. And as far as the running back position, Garrett, we did this during the running back odds of being a running back 1 historically. He's the one that kind of fell out of the running back 1 if you go back historical data. And this is a guy that comes in an offense where we've seen over the years, outside Todd Gurley, that Sean McVay just kind of shakes and bakes it, right? There's always that new rookie that comes in and does well. And Kyron Williams came into this league. He's a small guy, 5'9", 190 something pounds. So he's 5'9", 195 pounds. And that showed last year. He missed 4 games with an ankle injury. He hurt his hand in a playoff game. He had to get surgery out of it. Then they bring another guy in who's smaller as well, who they spent a decent draft capital on, who fits the mold pretty similar to Kyron Williams. There's some worry there from fantasy football productions. Now, if he still gets all the carries, and Kyron Williams got an unbelievable amount of carries last year, an unbelievable amount, and he led the league in rushing yards per game, 95.3. But he was top 3 or so, top 2 in the league in carries, and he missed 4 games. That's how many carries he got. So I'd like to know what you guys think about this from a dynasty perspective, because I personally wouldn't mind using every asset here on the Rams as a flip for something I feel more grounded into on my roster.
When you look at this running back group here, it is funny because pre-draft, my comp was Kyron Williams for Blake Corum. So they are very, very similar style players, players that are underwhelming athletes, but are gamers with really good vision and can do a little bit of everything. And so it's just fascinating that they took another guy like this. And I could see this being a situation where Kyren really needs to stay healthy, because if it gets to the point where Rich is forgetting we're still on video. He's
No, he's not. he wants
he is going to eat this on video. Oh my gosh.
I'm not going to eat it on video, but I can smell it on video.
He's absolutely going to eat it. He's not going to be able to help himself.
No, I would never eat on the air. That's disgusting.
All of that being said, it could be one of those situations where if Kyren misses a game or two and Corum comes in and is solid, they might just say, why give one of these guys 18, 20 touches a game when we could just give both of them 12? And it could end up being really, really frustrating for fantasy. So while I feel okay about Kyren, there's some real trepidation there as far as having him as my running back 1. I feel a lot better if he's my running back 2 overall. I did want to touch on the receivers. I know you said the only receivers we care about are Puka and Cup, and to some extent that's probably true, but there is a lot of buzz going around for a guy that I didn't love his tape, but this is similar to Puka, where it was a guy that's not a super complete receiver, but they're using him in a way where this offense seems to really get the best out of these players. In Jordan Whittington, Sean McVay's been talking him up, a lot of hype in camp about him. So there is a chance that he could end up being somewhat interesting and relevant at some point. I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as it happened with Puka, because there's not the injury path that allowed Puka to really swell. But Jordan Whittington, another name to kind of keep an eye on.
Jordan Whittington is a guy that I didn't like much either. I thought he was a bit stiff, and as long as they're not using him in the screen game like they try to do a little bit at Texas, I think he might be a little bit more effective in the NFL than he was there, because I literally watched that guy fall over his feet trying to make a guy miss in the screen game. So that's not his thing. But he's a big-bodied guy. Getting him downfield a little bit. I mean, I think they know how to use a body like that. You get him open across the middle, almost like a tight end, and that's basically what his movement skills would mimic. So I think as long as they have a little specific role for Whittington, I think he could be a guy that they find some value of. I'm not sure if that's going to equate to fantasy value, but my money is on Cooper Kupp this year as well, Rich. I think the start of the season here with Puka going down with a knee injury here in preseason and everything, I think it's going to be able to really get Cooper Kupp kind of established here early. And once that happens, you get used to a certain thing. I think it's going to take effort almost to sway that away from. You're so distracting with your drooling and your mouth washing or your mouth wiping. It's hard.
Listen, no one else makes me kind of drool a little bit. I think this offense is like Kobe. I wouldn't like a guy in my best ball drafts I'm drafting super late is Kobe Parkinson. Tyler Higbee, he hurt his ACL like in the playoffs, I believe. It wasn't a playoff game. So he's out.
Yeah, it was in January.
It was late.
For most of the year. And Sean McVay's shown this offense, like Tyler Higbee in the right situation can definitely be a weapon. And they've utilized a tight end in this offense. So with no real great, DeMarcus Robinson, Whittington, like Kobe Parkinson, even though he's a monster of height, and those guys usually don't win like 6'7", 6'9". Parkinson did show some athleticism there in New York for a small period of time. So I think he's the sneaky guy out there.
Agreed. Yep, absolutely.
Hey, Dynasty Nerds, want to revolutionize your fantasy experience? Look no further than Sleeper, the cutting-edge platform now featuring our Dynasty GM tool. Get unparalleled Dynasty insights right where you play. But that's not all. Sleeper's new picks product is a game changer. It's incredibly simple. Choose 2 to 8 players and predict if they'll perform above or below their projected stats. No complex lineups, no salary caps. Make picks before or during live games for NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, and more. Here's the kicker. You win up to 100 times your cash with just a few correct picks. And it gets better. Use our promo code NERDS and Sleeper will match your first deposit 100% up to $100. That's free cash to play with, folks. Ready to dominate? Use the link on our podcast description or enter the promo code NERDS when you sign up. Double your deposit, access to Dynasty GM, and start winning big with Sleeper picks.
All right, let's move on to the next team that we are going to cover, the San Francisco 49ers. And this is probably the team that we would say, yeah, we pretty much know what's going on. everywhere with the exception of one thing. So starting at quarterback, we got Brock Purdy, Josh Dobbs, and then Brandon Allen. Running back wise, Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Matt Breida, Patrick Taylor. Also Isaac Guerrero as well as a potential upside play there. Wide receivers, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Ronnie Bell, Jacob Cowing. Tight end wise, George Kittle, Eric Salbert, and Braden Willis. They did just recently cut Thomas, former tight end for the Washington Commanders. So all that being said, we know roughly what we're getting out of Brock Purdy. We definitely know what we're getting out of Christian McCaffrey. And we know what we're getting out of George Kittle. Like, there's not a lot to talk about with those three positions. I think they're all pretty well established in who they are and what they do. Really, the interesting thing on this team is the wide receiver position, and that all stems from what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk. Does a trade get approved? Because if so, that means drastically different things for the other receivers on this team.
Yeah, and obviously,
it's sorry, go ahead.
No, I figured you would want to eat. Obviously, right now, all the news and reports out there are saying that they're really close to hammering out a deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think right now everyone's kind of in wait and see mode, but it feels like a deal that's going to get done, right? I mean, even dating back to the off season, early in the off season, it seemed like all the smoke was kind of Ayuk to the Steelers. And then it fell apart and seemed like it wasn't going to be a thing. And then they just kind of jumped back in. Whether or not that was the agent kind of drumming up smoke from other teams or if it was all real, who knows? But whatever it was, whatever tactic was taken, it seemed to work. And the Steelers jumped back in. And, the thought of Ayuk and the Steelers is pretty interesting. I think him and George Kittle do very different, or George Pickens do very different things.
Pickens.
Yeah, so those guys would I think work very well together. But I guess we're not really talking about that part of it right now until that gets done. But for the San Francisco 49ers, this is a huge opportunity. If Ayuk gets moved, Ricky Pearsall, I think, skyrockets in the short-term value. I think everyone already has, a good long-term view of Pearsall when they made that pick. But, if drafts are happening, this coming weekend or something, rookie drafts, he'd probably get drafted significantly higher with the information that we have now than he was just after the NFL draft, or leading up to it.
Yeah, if Ayuk leaves with over 1,300 receiving yards, it definitely boosts Ricky Pearsall. It makes sense to let him walk when you spend a first-round pick on Ricky Pearsall, right? I don't know. I don't think it makes him significantly that much more significant in 2024 because remember they did extend Juwan Jennings there as well, a player could argue had a fantastic Super Bowl, Super Bowl. But a big key here is if you owned Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, you are praying this trade goes down tomorrow because they're drastically different players when one of those guys is out. I mean, you go from George Kittle being a solid tight end to potentially be the tight end one overall when one of those guys misses. I mean, he sees a 5% bump in targets when one of those guys is out. So George Kittle gets a massive bump. Deebo Samuel, massive bump to be the number one weapon in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and it gets them, be used in a running game as well. Puts both those guys. It puts George Kittle back in position to be the tight end one overall in Ayuk trade, and it puts Deebo Samuel at a position to be a top 6 fantasy receiver in 2024. If Ayuk stays, it means Deebo most likely a mid-range wide receiver to someone at range, and probably puts Kittle back in tight end 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. So this has massive fantasy implications. Just not the George Ayuk. It has to do with the San Francisco 49ers weapons that you do have.
Yeah, and from a cap standpoint, they are in an excellent position. They have the most cap space the San Francisco 49ers do right now at $48 million. So if something doesn't get worked out with the Steelers here as far as the compensation and the deal, because it sounds like even right now the San Francisco has a deal on the table to keep Brandon Ayuk there. He just hasn't necessarily accepted it yet. They have plenty of cap space to hold it, to keep him on this roster and and still get some deals done that they need to get done in the future. So it's still an option that he stays. So I don't want to make it sound like it's a done deal and he's out the door, because I do think he's a good player. He's going to be hard for them from a football standpoint to, for one to replace. So I do think they're going to make efforts, and they have been making efforts. They just maybe haven't been the type of monetary efforts that Ayuk has wanted. So we'll see how this whole thing flushes out.
This is the longest trade I've ever heard of in my entire life. Like, the San Francisco 49ers are obviously like, hey, we could take all the time we want here. Like, they're really giving every effort to try to keep Ayuk. And it sounds like from everything I've been reading, it's like Ayuk's like, no, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And like, well, what about this offer we have on the table? Like, they're really like holding out, hoping he resigns. Because there's been reports of this trade now going on for 2 weeks, which is nuts.
It does seem very drawn out. So that's what seems odd to me as well. And just looking financially, they could for sure keep him. So if they could figure out a way to give him enough money where he doesn't mind coming back, he doesn't no longer feels disrespected or whatever feelings he had with the first or second or third offer or whatever the heck, all the offers before this one, if they can somehow get him over that, I think they definitely have the money to keep him. So who knows? Maybe they kind of did this to get him to lower his own value. Like, hey, go ahead, see what else is out there. And when it's not as good as you think, this offer is still sitting here, type of thing. And that might be what's happening, and it might just be rubbed. It might have just rubbed him the wrong way. We'll see if he can get over it or not. This is all kind of conjecture on our part, obviously. So we'll see how this
real
plays
quickly. I know we've been having Eurogate as part of the show, and so we've been hustling. But I did want to mention some of the offensive line. So Arizona Cardinals projected to be the 26th best offensive line. So not a great offensive line, but it's not a drastically different unit, and James Conner's still balled out. Los Angeles Rams, middle of the pack at 16 as far as that team goes. And then when you look at the San Francisco 49ers, it's I just lost not as good of a unit as you would think for how good this team is. 24th ranked offensive line, but it doesn't matter. They know how to make it work. They run behind Trent Williams, and he's a stud, and they scheme guys. If he shows up, yeah, which is a huge, like, that drastically changes this team just as much as Brandon Ayuk. If he's not back, like, that's bad news bears.
And that was a part that I forgot to mention. I don't like, those are the two guys that are really hanging out there for them right now. Obviously, they have to think about Brock Purdy in the future, but they do have the cash to get these things done, or I guess they have the cap space to get these things done. Maybe it's a cash flow issue. I don't know, but because I don't know how well off this owner is actually for the 49ers. I know we talk about Mike Brown and some of these other owners that's the only thing that they have is their NFL team, and sometimes that can be a cash flow issue as far as signing some of these big deals. So maybe next time I'll give a little update on that, see if that's maybe what's causing some of this stuff. But it does seem to they definitely have the space for it, so maybe it is a cash flow issue.
Yeah, and before we move on to, like, I know I want to eat this gyro, but I'd be remiss to say, like, I do consider Brock Purdy. I think the market's starting to slowly catch up here a little bit, though. I said probably 5 months ago that Brock Purdy was probably one of the absolute best values in Superflex leagues, where people are just kind of like throwing him by the wayside. In his first full season, he led the league in passer rating with 113. He led all quarterbacks in yards per pass attempt at 9.6, and there's like 4 other analytic categories that he led. So Brock Purdy, the league is slowly catching up here, and he might live around like quarterback like 7, 8, 9, but he'll probably be a quarterback 1 here for the next 6 years. So he's still great value. And Christian McCaffrey just signed that extension at running back. They got him for multiple more years. He's an outlier running back, one of the greatest of all time. And this is somebody I saw this stat. Again, it goes into my Warren Sharp reading and my boy Rich Rebar. Christian McCaffrey, 33 games played with the 49ers, 39 touchdowns. Only 6 games total without a touchdown.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And to speak to that extension a little bit, it was through 2027. They do have an out after 2025. So, like most running back contracts, there is usually a kind of an out after a couple of seasons. And especially with a 28-year-old running back, the 49ers have protected themselves. So
Yeah.
not that I'm saying they're going to get rid of him after 2025 because they've got him locked up through 2027, but they can potentially get out from underneath him if they need to.
Most running back deals are year to year. The good thing when you feel good about Christian McCaffrey is whatever they're paying him, it's going to be good value because he's going to dominate. Hey, Dynasty nerds, it's time to take your Dynasty game to the next level with FFPC's Dynasty Startup Leagues. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, FFPC has a league for you with entry fees ranging from $100 up to $5,000. Choose from a variety of formats, including Superflex, Best Ball Superflex, Triflex, 1QB, and Standard. With weekly lineups, waivers, trades, head-to-head matchups, and playoffs, FFPC's fully managed leagues provide the ultimate dynasty experience. Most importantly, the leagues are here to stay. FFPC has never had a dynasty league fold. They manage the entire commissioner experience from buy-in management to fulfilling your orphans. FFPC is perfect place to expand your dynasty league portfolio. And here's the best part. As a Dynasty Nerds listener, you can get $25 off any entry fee as a new member when you use the promo code NERDS. Head over to myffpc.com now to draft your team, manage your roster, and dominate your league with FFPC. That's myffpc.com. Promo code NERDS for $25 off any entry fee for new members. FFPC, where dynasty dreams become a reality. Let's move on to our final team before I meet this mediocre gyro. The Seattle Seahawks. QB, Geno Smith, Sam Howell. At running back, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh, George Halani. Wide receiver, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, and D. Eskridge. At tight end, Noah Fant, Farrell Brown, and A.J. Barner.
This team's a tough one for this season. Offensive line wise, 31st according to PFF. So it's one of the lower end teams overall that we're going to be taking a look at as far as offensive line play goes. But Kenneth Walker had a solid season last year. We know it's a new coach, new offensive coordinator. Their offensive coordinator was formerly at the University of Washington. So there's some familiarity there with all those guys playing in the same state. But we do expect this to maybe be a little more pass happy than the offense has been in the past. So that could be a small little boost to guys like DK Metcalf, to Tyler Lockett. Jackson Smith and Jigba, unfortunately, it's probably going to be another year where we're excited about what we see at times, and there's going to be games where he balls out. But on a consistent basis, Matt, I don't know what you think, but I have a hard time believing that I could trust him to be my wide receiver 3 week in, week out. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, this is going to be a weird one. I think, again, for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I do think they're going to throw the ball, so I think he's probably going to have more value than last year, and just a natural progression. It sounds like this year he's done a lot better in camp than he did in the past. It's really next year for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think is going to be his kind of breakout year. If you look at the contracts for Tyler Lockett this year, he's got a cap hit of $18.9 million with $12 million of dead money still remaining. So not a lot to gain by cutting a guy like Tyler Lockett and getting out front. But next year it's bonkers, right? They owe him a $5.3 million roster bonus, and his cap hit goes from $18.9 million to $30.9 million. And then it goes from $12 million to $4 million of dead money. So they'll have a lot more reasons, like $26 million of cap space to clear next year if they get rid of Tyler Lockett after this year. And really a lot of the same for Geno Smith as well. So they owe him a $10 million roster bonus on the 5th day of the 2025 year. And they can save $25 million against the cap next season by getting rid of Geno Smith. So I would think those two guys are gone. This offense, I think, is going to look a lot different next season. And same with DK Metcalf to kind of go out on a limb. They can save $18 million against the cap next season if they get rid of him after this season. So if he's not a good fit with the coaching staff, if he's not balling out this year, he could be gone as well. So, those guys have some incentives to play well. So that might be good for them for this year. But if the coaching staff just kind of wants to go in a different direction for some of these guys, Geno Smith and Tyler Lockett specifically, I think are going to be easy cut candidates after this season. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba either way is going to be able to kind of really eat next season. And obviously, with Sam Howell being there, they traded for Sam Howell.
Yeah.
Does Geno Smith even get the entire year? You know what I mean?
I think he is one of my favorite backups. I love rostering several backup quarterbacks on my roster. He's one of my favorites because Geno Smith does have one of the most shaky jobs out of anybody. New coaching staff. You mentioned the contract. Like, there's a lot of things going against him. So if he's not sharp through the first 5-6 weeks, they might just say, screw it. Let's see what we have in a guy like Sam Howell and see if he's a good fit for us. So he is one that I like a little bit more than maybe some of the other backup quarterbacks in this league. So we'll kind of have to wait and see how that all plays out. The only player we haven't really covered yet so far, well, I guess there's two players. We touched quickly on Kenneth Walker. Zach Charbonnet, you guys more interested in him than last year? I know anytime there's a new coaching staff can get weird, and they're going to throw the ball more. It looks like Charbonnet might be the better pass catcher. Any thoughts between those two guys?
I think Kenneth Walker is still a superior running back. In the preseason, like, I know they've been talking up Kenneth Walker pretty well as too. Like, Kenneth Walker didn't go in a game at all, and Zach Charbonnet did, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah,
Kenneth Walker's the guy there.
I'm with you, Rich. I think Kenneth Walker is the guy that I'd want out of the two of them. And you mentioned Charbonnet as a nice or the better of the two options out of the backfield, but the numbers from last season: 29 receptions, 259 yards for Kenneth Walker, 33 receptions, 209 for Zach Charbonnet. So there's not really that much of a difference, and if anything, it tilts a little bit towards Kenneth Walker with the more yards on less catches. So I don't know. I think for me, I'm going to lean towards Kenneth Walker just because I like him more. I've always seen Charbonnet as kind of a.
I think everyone would draft or trade for Kenneth Walker well before Charbonnet. Only real question for me is, does that gap stay as big as it was last year, or does it close? I don't know.
Okay.
We'll have to see.
I don't think it closes. I'm still a big Kenneth Walker fan. I think Zach Charbonnet is a fine running back, but he's nothing special here to take away from something. I think Kenneth Walker does something special there. Definitely when it comes to elusiveness and power. Going back on the receivers for me, because I didn't have a chance to say any of those. Like, I think DK Metcalf is definitely probably the guy that likely finishes the higher fantasy receiver. I'd be real interested, like, how much longer the Seattle Seahawks brass would even want DK Metcalf on their team. Like, every year there's a report of him having anger issues. We saw, I can't remember one coach, I don't know if it was Mike Tomlin or who it was. The coach said, yeah, it's really easy to take DK Metcalf out of the game because all you got to do is get under his skin. You take him out of the game. It's our game plan every year, and every year it works. And that's why he was kind of off our board at the combine because of that issue. Already the report here that he took a helmet and swung at a teammate. So somebody who is consistent had these anger issues. I'm wondering how long DK Metcalf is for the Seattle Seahawks.
Well,
I think Jackson Smith. Yeah.
I know you were eating a gyro over there when I was talking.
Oh, it's
about
gone.
this.
It's gone. It's invisible.
But they can save $18 million against the cap next season by getting rid of DK Metcalf. That's
okay.
That was my main point when I was talking about him. If he's not jiving with his coaching staff, I think there's a lot of financial incentive to get rid of him. And there's some other guys on this team that could step up. Jackson Smith and Jigba obviously is the number one, but they like a guy, Jake Bobo too, who just catches everything. And also he's a big body guy who might be able to take a little bit of that DK Metcalf, I guess, workload kind of off his plate if they ended up getting rid of DK Metcalf.
And that's why, man, I feel like, and listen, this is just a gut feeling. I have nothing to base this off of. Like, I think there's a chance Jackson Smith and Jigba is the number one fantasy receiver in this offense this year. This is somebody the head coach has been talking up. My head coach, Mike McDonald's been talking up pretty well. We last year was his first year playing football after almost 2 years, essentially, for missing that almost entire football season at Ohio State. So over a year. there, and we saw how well he played in the playoffs as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba. So I think they have a chance. Like if they do, if that. Well, my point was about that. DK Metcalf take was like there might be something like, hey, we want to go ahead and show DK Metcalf like you don't have to be the guy here. Like we have a guy in Jackson Smith and Jigba. This is the future of our team to kind of put him in place. And they already have a very respected guy in Tyler Lockett. He got his extension there, but even he kind of took a step back last year. His yards per run they're the lowest than it's ever been, I think, in his career. So I think there is a sneaky chance here that Jackson Smith and Jigba comes in and he's the number one fantasy receiver in this offense and kind of, cements his draft capital they got in his rookie drafts and finishes at like a high-end wide receiver too. And maybe DK Metcalf, because his team has to throw enough. Maybe DK Metcalf doesn't say he doesn't finish as a wide receiver too, of course. He could be a low-end wide receiver too. And of course, he could be a low-end wide receiver one. He has that kind of talent in his belt. But with all these reports about DK Metcalf, head coach Mike McDonald coming out and talking Jackson Smith and Jigba up pretty consistently, a lot of opportunities he gets. I think he might be able to take a step forward and be the guy this year in this offense. The Kenneth Walker and JSN show.
All right.
I mean, I think that would make me happy as a guy that really likes Jackson Smith and Jigba and just kind of hasn't seen it yet.
Anything on Noah Fant? Is he one of those players that's just more or less useless for fantasy and unless you're in a real pinch, or do you think that there's any upside at all after in year 5, 6, whatever he's in now?
I think he's a talented tight end, still young enough to take a step forward here. But again, you're talking about 3 talented receivers. He'd be the 4th option and still hasn't put together in 5 years he's been in the NFL. So like he does not, is he a nice flyer to have on the backside with your fingers crossed? Yeah. Am I optimistic about it? No, not even the slightest, I guess.
Rich, him or Irv Smith?
Oh, definitely Noah Fant.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
So you're telling me there's
and if everybody wants to know, the gyro is very, listen, a mid gyro is still a good gyro. Very mid.
Very mid.
But I'm still a satisfied customer.
All right.
Adios.
Well, I guess that's
at least I was sneaky about it. You guys even know I ate it on air.
Yeah, no one had any clue. You never had any sauce on your face, nothing. We were
Come lick my lips, pervert.
Adios, man. Bye.